On Business Incorporated today, we'll give you updates on the power crisis in South Africa. And also there's boosting horticulture in Africa. What's the updates on that? We'll give it to you on this episode of Business Incorporated. And Zimbabwe weakens currency in the midst of its efforts to boost the value. Good afternoon. Welcome to Business Incorporated here on Channels Television. I'm Ini John Mekwa. Let's get right into it, and we start with the market. As usual, it's mostly positive sentiment on the African continent, except for EGX, that's for Egypt. Nigeria has 0.37% up at intraday. Let's look at the numbers there at 52,612.17. Jersey of South Africa is also positive, but lower, 0.10%, but it's still cruising at that 78,000 point level. Egypt is, however, red, 0.39%, 16,967.92. And Kenya, oh my God, they have more than 4% positive. That's what they closed with yesterday. We wish them a very sustaining bullish sentiment or run in that market. Let's cross over now to the Middle East and see what's happening, and it's mostly positive across board. Abu Dhabi is positive 0.32%. Dubai also positive 1.28%, still there. Saudi Arabia positive 0.27%, and Qatar doing like Kenya, but less, 2.04% going on there. Now let's move from there to Europe, and we're starting with Germany, where German automaker Volkswagen has cheated in emissions tests. Now, the former CEO of that company has pleaded guilty for his role in the fraud case. We have Lars now joining us for this interesting conversation. Hi, Lars. Well, interesting one here, seeing a CEO agree that he actually cheated, when it comes to that. I wonder what this means for the company in the future.
Having me, Mr. Stadler essentially admitted that he knew what was going on, and that was that Volkswagen used software to cheat on emissions tests, lowering emissions on the test stand to make it look like their cars adhere to the appropriate emission standards. Now, Stadler was not the man behind Dieselgate. That would be managers at VW itself, and of course some engineers who had cooked up the scheme and programmed everything. But he was the CEO of one of VW's biggest brands, and he knew about the fraud in July of 2016, but he allowed cars to be sold until 2018. So that means a lot of cars hit the road that should have had much lower emissions than they actually achieved. It also obviously led to environmental damage, and it led to Volkswagen almost going bankrupt. After all, Volkswagen had to pay a fine of 1 billion euro over Dieselgate, and Audi had to pay another 800 million euros.
Yeah, but help us to understand, what exactly has Mr. Stadler pleaded guilty to?
Indeed, Mr. Stadler denied any and all knowledge of what was going on during testing, but in the end, there was just too much pressure on him. His denials were not plausible, and a judge told him that he would go to jail for 2.5 years if he wouldn't confess. And so he did, essentially to avoid jail time. And that worked for him. Stadler got a suspended sentence, and he has to pay a fine of 1.1 million euros.
So I wonder what this will do to their market, and what message this will send to others who are players in that automobile industry.
It sends a terrible message, because 1.1 million euros may sound like a lot to regular folks, but it's really not a lot for Stadler. As CEO of Audi, he made 7.7 million euros per year, and that over several years. So he has to give up just a small fraction of his recent earnings. And that's a bit like catching a bank robber who just stole 10 millions, and as a punishment, you make him give back 2 millions. That is not a very harsh punishment at all. In fact, then we should all just become bank robbers. That would be the message here that they're sending. This very mild punishment for Stadler essentially proves that financial fraud and crime does pay off, even when you get caught.
Alas, I don't think a lot of us want to be bank robbers. Well, thank you so much for the updates. Okay, so let's move to London now, where Juliana is standing by. Juliana, good afternoon. It doesn't look like we will stop talking about Brexit in a very, very long time, because now we see that Brexit tariff rules is posing existential threats to the UK car industry. So once again, Brexit is in the news.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, Innie. We're almost 7 years, can you believe it, since the Brexit vote. And once again, it is causing a significant migraine for another Prime Minister. Brexit actually famously got rid of 2 Prime Ministers, and Rishi Sunak is certainly on the ropes. We've had a warning, shall we say, from the owners of Stellantis. Now, Stellantis is a car parent company. They own the likes of Vauxhall and Peugeot, and they've got a significant presence in the United Kingdom. I think they've got about 3 ports dotted around the country, and it employs over 5,000 people. Now, they have had a stark warning concerning Brexit and rules of origin, and now this is where it gets complicated, which is why Brexit is a huge issue. Now, when Boris Johnson, the former Prime Minister, was trying to negotiate an oven-ready deal with Ursula von der Leyen, the European Union Commission President, electric vehicles and components was at the very last end. They deemed that there were more important issues to try and fix, which was the Northern Ireland Protocol, which is still not fixed. But it was hastily put into the trade deal, and now car makers who operate in the UK say it's going to be a big issue, because in the trade deal from next year, any vehicle, any electric vehicle that is manufactured in the UK and exported to the European Union must have 45% of the components locally sourced. And Stellantis bosses are saying that that is absolutely impossible. It's not possible to do that. That gigawatt factories in the UK are scarce. We are still trying to push up our gigawatt and battery making facilities. We are not there yet. And so what Stellantis have said is that if this trade deal cannot be negotiated within the next 12 months, then they are going to have to exit the UK market. And of course, that means thousands of jobs will go, not just with Stellantis, but also with other car manufacturers who are present here. It is a huge issue. As I said, Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, has been commenting on the statement, the warning from Stellantis, saying that it is possible that a deal would need to be negotiated. Rishi Sunak absent from PMQs today because he's flying off to Japan for a G7 meeting later this week. But it is a huge headache. The fact that the world's 4th largest car maker is saying they'll have to pull out of the UK if these rules of origins are not changing could potentially mean that other car makers would follow suit. Not great when the UK is limping itself away from a recession. We also had comments last night from Nigel Farage, a name most people can't forget. He was the former UKIP leader, basically the man that threatened David Cameron and forced him into this Brexit vote. He says that Brexit is not working for anyone. We all know that, but it is a huge political debate in the UK that has now entered the economics debate with this exit warning from Stellantis today.
Yeah, well, this Brexit seems like there's no going back, and yet moving forward is a very difficult task. But Jeremy Hunt has also been talking about easing immigration for struggling sectors, and I think this, one way or the other, also has to do with Brexit, also with immigration and people who had to leave because they were not qualified to stay in the UK anymore to work.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. This is another Brexit story. Again, anybody who knows Britain or knows the Conservative government know that backbenchers and typical Conservative voters are always pushing for less migration in this country. That really is their flying flag. And we know that the successful Brexit vote in 2016 was pushed by migration. The fact that those who wanted to vote leave was saying that, look, the free movement of people is what is making your quality of life worse. That has been an issue in this country this week because the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, had a pretty outlandish, shall we say, statement that she made talking about migration and the fact that, lots of the jobs that migrants come into the UK to do, such as driving lorries, picking fruits, we know they do much more than that, but in terms of what most people think they do, she said that, it doesn't have to be migrants doing this job, but we can actually train British people to do the jobs that Britain needs to get itself on the road to recovery. She also said that white people shouldn't feel guilty for not being woke. Anyway, that's caused a big stir, and yesterday Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, was speaking to the British Chamber of Commerce, and he was asked to remark on the comments made by Suella Braverman, and he said, look, that Britain are going to be taking a pragmatic approach to migration, that we welcome migrants. Migration has always been used as a soft power for the United Kingdom, but he emphasised that Britain is going to be pivoting away from being a country that relies on cheap labour from migrants, and that it wants to be a high-skilled, high-wage economy. Now, this is important because within the next couple of weeks, we are expecting data from the Home Office, which is going to shed some light on migration, net migration in the UK last year, where it's expected that we've broken a record and perhaps over 500,000 people came into this country, something that we know is contributing to the economy, but is not a vote winner for Conservative heartlands. When it comes to university students, which is a major topic of discussion at the moment, we know the government are in conversations to basically ban anybody who's doing a one-year master's degree in the UK from bringing in their family. This is likely to affect Nigerians who are coming into the UK because they only accounted for 7% of foreign students. So last year, the latest data is that 34,000 Nigerian students came into the UK, bringing in about 32,000 dependents, and I think that the government are using the example of China, who came last year to study, I think about 114,000 of them, and they only brought in 400 dependents. So there is lots of discussion about migration. New rules are going to be coming out at the end of the month, but we know that migrants contribute so much, particularly Nigerian students in the UK who are here legally, and pay their fair way.
Yeah, well, Juliana, good you emphasize the word legally. So we call it JAPA here, but it's good to know that it's legal. Yeah. Thank you so much, Juliana, for giving us up to date with all of that. All right, let's do U.S. now, where stock features are up as investors await news of development in the negotiations between congressional leaders and President Joe Biden on the country's debt ceiling. This has been in the news. But anyways, let's take Maria Bird now. She has the details of yesterday's trade, that's Tuesday's trade, and she shared this with us.
The U.S. stock market fell on Tuesday as the Dow Jones was down by over 1%, the S&P 500 down by 0.64%, and the heavy tech Nasdaq was down by 0.18%. Many investors are watching to see the outcome of Tuesday's meeting between President Biden and Congress. It is clear that Secretary Yellen made an announcement on Tuesday morning stating that it is vital that President Biden and the leaders in Congress come up with a solution, as June 1st is quickly approaching. It is clear that many investors are also watching and concerned that the U.S. economy will take a pitfall. This pitfall would mean major struggle for many Americans and could be catastrophic for the U.S. economy.
Thank you so much, Maria, for that. Now let's head to South Africa, where we know that the issue of power supply, electricity supply, has been in the news and is the bane of development of economic growth right there in South Africa. Yesterday, we saw the unemployment data, and we saw that it was up the first quarter. Now let's have joining us our correspondent in Johannesburg, Innocent Samosa, to give us update on that. Hi, Innocent. Good afternoon. So we saw unemployment numbers yesterday, and we know this is hugely connected to electricity supply, which the country has been struggling with. What's the updates with that supply at this time? All right, seems like we have a little bit of hitch there with Innocent. Innocent, are you back? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, great. So I was asking, yesterday we saw unemployment data from South Africa, and I don't think anybody was surprised seeing the issue of electricity supply shortage that the country has been experiencing. But what's the update now? Any hope?
100%. A very good afternoon to you, and thank you so very much for having me. Yeah, the South Africa remains on stage 6 load shedding, and of course, we know that small and medium enterprises are the biggest contributors to South Africa's GDP, and they're the biggest casualties when it comes to this load shedding. But Parliament's Standing Committee on Public Finance has been hearing evidence earlier today from the Minister of Public Enterprises, Pravin Gordhan. This, of course, comes at the back of those allegations that were leveled by the former Eskom CEO, Andre Dareta, when he detailed some of the things that he was seeing when he was in Eskom, and the fact that Eskom is run by cartels. That's what he mentioned there. So they're hearing those evidence there, but he refuted all of those claims. But Eskom is going through challenges, and we understand right now that those power plants are old. In fact, a power plant's lifespan is supposed to take, about 35 years. As they grow, the performance dilapidates, and they start performing bad. So as it stands, we heard from the, many experts saying that South Africa might be going to a blackout. And speaking to local media this morning, the minister in the presidency, Kumbunjo Ntshavheni, said that if there is any eventuality of a blackout, they will communicate with citizens as to what to do. But that just goes to show that there's no clear plan as to how to get people out of this darkness just yet. But also, the president has said that in his newsletter that South Africa has installed a capacity to produce approximately about 46,000 megawatts. And we know that during peak hour, we use about 32,000 megawatts. So it really remains to be seen whether or not this 46,000 megawatts will be sustainable, given the fact that also we're heading into the winter period.
Well, Innocent, thank you so much. I'm sure this is a story that we'll obviously get more updates on, and we wish you guys the best there. Get more generators like we do in Nigeria. Thank you, Innocent.
Thank you so much.
All right, let's take a break now. When we come back from that break, we do have another conversation for you and some other stories. So stay with us here on Business Incorporated. Welcome back. Still watching Business Incorporated here on Channels Television. Now we're going to discuss something that you may not readily think about, but it's feeding millions of Africans, and it's also a source of nutrition to a whole lot of Nigerians or Africans. That's horticulture. Well, there's been conversations about strengthening the horticulture sector on the continent, and we have joining us for that conversation Penina Yumbia, East Africa Horticulture Lab Hub Manager, joins us from Kenya. Good afternoon, Penina. Good to have you on the show.
Good afternoon. Nice to have me.
Yeah, so how popular or not is the horticulture sector on the continent?
Thank you. So horticulture in East Africa and Africa in large is very popular. It's one of the promising sectors in the region. It's actually been growing tremendously. Recently, you found that especially during the COVID-19 season, there was very high demand for the horticultural product, and there have been great demand of the horticultural sector, and it has actually been growing very drastically. And one of the things you should note is that Africa has a very good climate, which favors or rather promotes the production of horticultural products in the region. Having said that, you find that horticulture is also being faced by various challenges, which has limited the production and experiencing the full potential of the horticultural sector in Africa.
So what are some of those challenges, and what could be done, to deal with them?
So thank you for asking that. You find that most of the production in Africa is being dominated by small-scale farmers. For example, you find that in Kenya, 80% of the total production is by small-scale farmers. You find that the farmers are experiencing various challenges along the value chain. And by the value chain, it means from the production level. For example, at the production level, you find that the farmers are faced by challenges such as limited rainfall, because most of these farmers are relying 100% on rainfall. And you find that with the climate change issues, that these farmers, they are not doing irrigation. So if there is no rainfall, what that means is that they are not producing. Another challenge, you find that limited inputs, or rather the inputs are very expensive and the farmers cannot get access to the inputs, or rather the inputs which are also available, you find that some of them are counterfeit. So when the farmers go to the market with the little money they have strained to gain, you find that sometimes they get products which are not, or rather the inputs which are not the right products, and that if you start with poor products, that means that production will be limited. Another challenge along the value chain is during harvesting, what you call post-harvest challenges. So whatever little farmers have managed to produce, you find that a lot of it goes to waste. For example, in East Africa, you find that horticultural produce, you are losing up to 40%, even at times more, of what you are producing. And if the farmers are losing 40%, which they are struggling to produce, then it means that they have nothing to consume, or rather they have nothing at the end of the day to take to the market. Another challenge also comes with the marketing system. You find that most of these horticultural commodities, I want to give an example of mango, which is very common here in Nairobi, where I am, or rather in Kenya. Mango is seasonal, meaning that it comes to production at specific periods of the year. And during this specific period of production, there's a lot of production, there's a lot of produce. Then farmers don't have market to take their produce. So you find that farmers are left at the mercy of brokers, or rather what you call middlemen, who exploit them, and they don't get enough returns from their investment, which is horticulture.
A whole lot of challenges there for farmers to deal with in this industry that seems to, be coming up. And we do hope that it gets attention to. Thank you so much for your time, Penina Yumbia, East Africa Horticulture Lab Hub Manager, for your time this afternoon. All right, so let's go to Zimbabwe now, where the currency is facing a turbulent ride with devaluation of nearly 14% in the weekly central bank auction. This comes after the finance minister, Nkube Mutuli, called for changes to how the foreign exchange market is being managed. The devaluation is the latest policy move to stabilize the local currency and is in line with the government's push for reforms in the foreign exchange market. The currency sold for 1,404 Zimbabwe dollars for $1 compared with 1,212 a week ago. On Tuesday, the central bank auctioned $14 million of foreign exchange and plans to sell $15 million at next week's sale. Meanwhile, a member of the central bank's monetary policy committee, Persistence, says that the improved functionality of the system is expected to gradually close the gap between the parallel and official rates. Well, that's it on the program today. Thank you so much for being a part of it. I'm Minnie John Mekwa. Enjoy the rest of your day.